There's a woman I used to represent, and she didn't vote for me when I was in the Congress.
And your husband voted for him.
I did.
Okay. What have we got? Everybody here from Connecticut? This does me no good.
We're from Connecticut.
But you know what, Chris Shays, he spent, how many years were you in Congress?
21.
And you know, he was not beloved by the Republicans. Did you know that?
Well, you know, I'd like to vote for you, so I think you should be reaching out to more Democrats.
Well, but you guys can't vote in the primary. I'll be back. You'll think, no, you can't, because the deadline's passed for you to vote. So, you remember what Arnold says? I'll be back. So you'll have your chance right back here. Yes, sir.
I would just like to say that I think immigration is a good thing because our population is getting very old people heavy. And as we know,
It's a good thing you're not running for president.
but you know, we have demographic problems as far as our workforce. If we don't have more people who are of working age,
We just got to make it legal.
You know,
You can't people just
we
come
won't
in
have any
here.
Social Security.
Yeah.
If we don't have working people, you know. But anyways,
Did you play football at Navy?
no, I didn't.
Then how can you have the gall to wear a shirt?
I used to live in Norfolk, Virginia.
Okay, good. That
Very
qualifies
close.
you.
I love
Okay.
all the Army people. But my real question is about the climate change stuff, the Clean Power Plan of Obama,
I
and
oppose it.
the Paris thing.
Yeah,
And-
well, I don't even know what they did there.
Because you know it's really cold in New Hampshire, and I mean I love polar bears, but I kind of like having cheap energy to stay warm in this very cold.
What is
place.
your background?
In what respect?
Well, where'd you go to school?
I went to Florida A&M University.
Okay, and what are you doing now?
I work for the Calvin Coolidge Presidential Foundation.
Oh,
Another Republican
Nice,
president.
nice and smart young man. So no, I think we need all energy sources. We need wind, we need solar, we need geothermal. We got to dig coal, clean it, and burn it. We need nuclear. We need fracking for natural gas. We're going to have low energy prices. We could bring businesses back to America, and we should have all of the above. And we should respect the environment, but not worship it. So I'm a believer in all of the above. And that's an interesting organization. We're gonna have to find out more about that. Okay, yes, right here, sir.
Maybe just to tag onto that, how about ethanol?
Well, I was opposed to it before I was for it. Okay? When I was in Congress, I tried to kill the subsidy and I lost. And the subsidy's basically gone, but it's part of this plan. And so I had to go to Iowa, and I'm gonna sound like a double talker, but here's the problem. I got people in the ethanol business in Ohio, and now that they have a plan in place, I'm comfortable with the plan that's in place, because I don't want to throw a bunch of Ohioans out of work. So I've sort of modified my position, but fortunately the subsidy is gone, and what they have now lasts till about 2020. And I see no reason to just get everybody in a tizzy. Is that okay with you?
No.
Yeah. Well, I'm just telling you how I feel, so there's nothing else I can do. Is that your wife with you? How did I do in that answer? Not good? Okay. Can't win them all. That's what they say. So, but look, I mean, the subsidies are gone, but one of the things I learned is like, when I came in as governor, I had a choice. Okay, should I just fire a bunch of state employees? Well, if I have an unemployment problem, how am I helping it by firing people? One of the hardest decisions I had to make was whether we would continue to subsidize an industry in the eastern part of the state that has never been profitable, and we couldn't see a road to profitability, and ratepayers were paying for it. So one of my aides said to me, well, John, if you close that place down, these people are going to have nothing. They're going to be on relief. And I thought about it, and now with the energy industry coming into Ohio, I thought, well, maybe they can get a job, and I ended up not continuing the subsidy. So what I would say about ethanol is I think that the fact that that subsidy's gone makes me comfortable, and I just don't want to throw people out of work, but if you're mad, I don't blame you. Okay, right here, sir.
Thank you very much for coming and doing this.
You can't do everything in let's say, be optimistic, 8 years. You can't do everything. So rather than telling me what the most important thing is, what would you throw off the bus if you can't do something?
Well, I think the first thing is you want to pick your agenda. We'd have a very aggressive 100-day agenda. Jobs, rebuilding alliances overseas, rebuilding the relations in Congress, and that would include the Social Security, tax reform, regulatory reform, and government restraint, and rebuilding the Pentagon with this reform. What is it that I wouldn't do? I don't know. I chew gum and walk at the same time. Here's what I'll give you a little something the way I look at it. I send a ton of stuff to the legislature. Here's a state senator. He's an advance man for me. He comes in here and helps me. Frank is I overwhelm you guys with ideas, don't I?
My wife says I'm never home, I'm always absorbed.
So, well, what I'm saying to you is, every time we do a budget, we would do a 2-year budget. But in the second year, I would give them another budget. It'd drive me crazy. There was so much stuff, but there was so much stuff we needed to do. And what I have found, and Frank's a good witness to this, is when I give them a big agenda, I get more done than if I give them a little agenda. But you gotta think it all through. I think we need to restructure the government. I think we need to shrink it. I think we need fewer departments. But that would come later because you gotta do all the research. But the number one thing up top would be jobs and rebuilding alliances and rebuilding the military. I mean, in terms of what else I wouldn't do, I don't know. I mean, I can't think of what it would be. What do you have a suggestion?
Fair enough. No, you have to.
Those are my priorities,
You have to
yeah.
prioritize, and something may not make it.
Yeah. I'll tell you what I think is probably not likely to make it in the short term. Individual tax reform. It's the hardest thing you can do. Corporate tax reform, I think, can happen, but it might have to come later. Because when you start messing with the tax code, you got a zillion people who try to stop you. I face it in Ohio, and it's always tough. The tax reform is one of the hardest things you can do. And so that may have to come a little bit later.
Thank you.
Way in the back. I hate to give up though on anything. I really do.
So I have 2 questions. So first, this is my 11-year-old son, Ben.
Ben, how are you? And who's
He came
that
in today.
sitting next to you?
This is my 13-year-old daughter, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
And Ben came in and saw the debt clock there.
Yeah.
And my first question is, can you explain the national debt to my 11-year-old son? And can you tell him what the debt would be for him after your presidency?
Well, Ben, I want to tell you right away, I want to thank you for the party that you've given me, okay, which you're going to pay for. Hey, if I said, Ben, let's go to lunch, and you said, well, wait a minute, nobody's ever asked me to go to lunch before, but I said, let's go to lunch, and then I'm going to have a hot dog and chili, and you're going to have nothing, but you're going to pay for my lunch, what would you think? Would you like that? Pardon? You would probably. What do you mean probably? You get your money out of the piggy bank? Do you get an allowance?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to have you pay for my lunch out of your allowance. How's that feel?
Bad.
Okay. Yeah. So right now, Ben, you're going to owe $58,000. Okay. I mean, thank you, Ben. And it's going to keep going up for a number of years, and then. By the way, Dad, when I was chairman of the budget committee, we are told, and is it confirmed? That the clock stopped going up and the debt started going down because we paid off $500 billion of the publicly held debt. So Ben, here's the situation. Because we have a lot of needs in the country, you're gonna have to get it under check, but it can't be done in a day because you would just disrupt everything. You understand what I mean by that?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's going to take time, but probably not as long as I think it's going to take, and then it stops going up, and then when we run surpluses, we start paying it down, and you don't have to pay as much. Okay? Take your sister to lunch, would you? Okay. Sarah, how old are you, 11? 13. 13, and your brother is?
11.
Okay, anybody else in the family, any other brothers or sisters?
A 9-year-old.
Okay. And how are you guys getting along with the 9-year-old? Is that a boy or a girl?
Boy.
How are you getting along with him?
Not well at all.
Okay. Okay, what's your second question, Dad?
So my second question is, I understand your grandparents were immigrants, right?
Yes.
So I don't want to ask about illegal immigrants. I want to ask about legal immigration.
Right.
Right. Everyone, people who want to come into this country, there are a lot of people who want to come in, who want to follow the rules, and it's a real privilege to be an American.
Right.
Do you think that the amount of legal immigration we allow should be greater, should be less, or is just right as it
I'd
is?
say right now it should be where it is. That would be my sense. I don't want to really restrict it. I want it to be legal. As to whether you make it greater now, I don't think the public would support it, but I'm not sure anybody's really in favor of cranking it down if we were to sit down and talk to them. And I think the plan or the suggestion I make about a guest worker program, about legalization on citizenship, I think it can pass, and this would be behind us. And by the way, once you build a wall, if anybody comes in, you're going back. No excuse. You got to go back. We can't have any more of this, because the people are just had it with this. Okay?
All right, and
Oh, you have another question?
no
too?
question,
Oh.
just a quick test for my good friend who lives out in Cary, OH?
Oh. Cary, Ohio? Have you ever been to Cary, Ohio?
No, but I have good friends who live
Have you heard what happened in Cary, Ohio? Well, many years ago, they were bringing a holy item from the Vatican for a parade, a procession in the town of Cary. And when they were supposed to start the procession, it was pouring rain. And I guess it was the priest in charge. He said, we're going to start the procession. And they went out and marched down the street, and the rain didn't fall on them. It fell on both sides of them. And now this church is one of the places that people visit. And people go there by the thousands now. And there are testimonies that people who have been there have been healed. I think it's incredible. And it's a little town of Cary, Ohio. You know where that is, Frank? Yeah, it's on the way up towards Cleveland. Great story. Ask your buddy about it, okay? Thank you. Sure. Yes, ma'am.
So we've talked primarily about domestic policy,
Yeah.
But I care a lot about foreign policy.
Okay.
So here's a strange question for you. I recognize that it's probably a little bit early for you to name who your Secretary of State would be, but if you could pick a Secretary of State from history, living or dead, who would that be?
I think Jim Baker was a very good Secretary of State. Very smart, business-oriented, tougher than nails. He was the only man in Washington that ever intimidated me, and I told him that, and he said, why did I intimidate you? I said, well, because when you threatened me, I believed you would carry it out. And he was very, very good. But that's a very good question. I was actually thinking, I met this woman, and I'm not going to tell you who it is, and she had a lot of experience with China, very successful business person, great personality, and I kind of liked her, but she won't support me, so she's out of luck. So, no, I'm saying to you, that's an important issue, because on foreign affairs, I believe there's three things that ought to be put together. I think we ought to have a diplomatic corps. I think the military ought to be included with the diplomats, and I think the business community has a role. Because there are people who do business in countries who have more insight into what's happening in the country than a lot of people in the State Department. And so I think there's room for three. The Secretary of State has got to be somebody who's really unique, who knows how to connect, who's firm and tough, and will understand what I expect, which is to, let me tell you a little bit. Russia, I would be arming Ukrainians. I would be telling the Russians, you don't go into NATO. You don't go into Finland, you don't go into Sweden, don't try us. Do not try us. I don't want to make them an enemy, but enough's enough. China, you want to cyber attack us? We're going to defend ourselves, and we will have an offensive capability because we're going to create a cyber command. And somebody hacks us, you're a criminal. And we are going to track you down wherever you live on the face of this earth. And by the way, you don't own the South China Sea, so knock it off. And by the way, it's time for you to get in the ball game on North Korea. Now, what do you want us to do? See, a lot of these things don't get said publicly, especially with the Chinese. What are you going to do? What are you going to do with North Korea? Because you got the leverage. You tell us what you need out of us, and we're going to tell you what we need out of you. But we don't want to make them an enemy. There's no reason to make them an enemy, but they gotta know where we are. Middle East, Israel's our friend. If they do something I don't like, if I were president, I'm not talking in public. We'll have a little cup of coffee behind doors, and they'll understand what we mean. Because they're a great ally, and we shouldn't treat our enemies better than we treat our friends. ISIS has to be destroyed. And it should be a coalition like George Bush the first put together. Arabs, Westerners, take care of ISIS, settle it down, and let the regional powers put the region together. Because the last time we put it together, we ended up with a dysfunctional situation. And Turkey, we need to pull Turkey our way. Because they're now making better relations with Israel, which is really significant. We need to have them in our way, not to the east, because they're a bridge to the Middle East, very important. And the only other one that I would mention now is Brazil, because I want to go to Rio. So that's kind of a little quick trip around the world. Yes, sir, right here.
As you probably know, New Hampshire has one of the highest student debt in the country. What are your thoughts on how to
Make college
affordable for middle-class families?
First of all, if you have the big debt, I think there's two things we can think about. Letting have businesses have an incentive to helping somebody pay off their debt as a recruiting tool. And secondly, maybe you should be able to do some community service that I'm thinking about that can help you to work off some of the debt. Now, my daughters, Megan here, they're gonna be going to college. There's a couple things. Brand. You know what brand is? Yeah, you know what a brand is.
Oh, brand, yeah.
Yeah, what is that? Is that a North Face shirt?
Okay.
You got on? No, that isn't North Face, is it?
No.
No, because it costs less. It costs less than North Face, didn't it?
Exactly, yeah.
Why'd you buy that one and not the North Face?
Don't say it.
So let me ask you a question. Why shouldn't everybody shop for a school that they can afford, based on what they can afford and what they offer? Because we shop a lot of the times on the basis of brand.
Sure.
So one of my daughters wants to go to Arizona. She doesn't know which school, but she just wanted to go to Arizona. Now she's doing better because now she wants to go to London to school. Hell, I don't even know. I said to my wife, what kind of school is that? You know? But it's what? London School of Art. Are you going to be an artist, or what? Did you get a full? Okay. Well, I don't know enough about it, but we're going to dig into it, Reese. Now, but here's another. Come on, give me a hug. I'm not making fun of you. Come on, okay. If I made fun of you, I'm sorry. How's that? But I wasn't. We all laugh at ourselves a little bit. But here's the other thing. There are some students that just don't have a lot of money. So let me ask you a question. Why don't you go to community college for 2 or 3 years? Do you know that if you go to a community college for 2 years, you're going to cut your student debt in half? And we're going to push to get you to be able to go to a community college for 3 years, then transfer to the university in the 4th year. You'll cut your costs by 3/4. Yeah, I mean, we never think about this, but you can do it. And then the other issue is when you're in high school, you can get credit for going to college. Take all the college courses you can. That's what you need to do. And so, you know, what I would say to you is there's many paths there, but let me give you one other. The people who lead these schools have got to start running it more like a business, and they got to get to the things that drive up the costs. I'm told that the biggest significant increase in the cost of higher education has not university salaries. You know what it is? Overhead. Cut your overhead. You know, it's grown, I think it's gone up, Chris, I think I read it went up 60% overhead costs over the last few years.
Every time we get to student aid, they just gave less to the students. They said the students had more money, so that the school pocketed the student aid money.
So we got to get a handle on all this.
Part of it is too, is in New Hampshire, we unfortunately don't contribute to higher education as much as many other states. For example, our son here graduated from the University of Idaho, and the cost for him to attend, yeah, go Vandals here. The cost for him to attend Idaho was very similar, if not cheaper, than going to the University of New Hampshire.
Yeah. But you should control your costs here. I mean,
Exactly.
the president, I'm not gonna tell them what to charge,
No.
you should tell them.
No, I know.
Why'd you
It's-
go to
it's a-
Idaho?
It's a state issue as well.
Yeah, why'd you go to Idaho?
For wildlife resources.
Okay. Did you graduate from there?
I did.
University of Idaho?
Yep.
And then you moved back?
Yep.
You going back to Idaho?
Maybe.
Okay, good. So what I would say to you is that the federal government has a role in this, for sure, but we gotta get we gotta get a handle on these costs, both from the administrative side and the opportunity to get an education in a different way. Because I tell you what's going to happen, we're gonna have online education, and it's gonna really disrupt the traditional education system.
And that's what he did this last year, is he finished up online.
There you go.
Much cheaper.
Much cheaper.
Much cheaper.
Well, those are the things you're gonna take one more? Okay, one last one, right here, ma'am, yes.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you.
What the national approach to the opioid crisis
Oh.
would be, where we're losing so many of our young people.
You know, this is a good call, or a good question to finish on. I just had a call with all of my anti-drug people. We've been working on the drug issue for 6 years, and it's multifaceted. 1, bust drug dealers. 2, take the license away from doctors who are violating their Hippocratic oath, and they're just irresponsible. 3, have guidelines for the issuing of prescription drugs for both chronic and acute pain. Do you understand what I mean by that?
Absolutely.
You get your wisdom, when I was a kid, you get your wisdom teeth out. I'll tell you what happened when I was a kid. Girls, listen to this one. You get your wisdom teeth out. I go home, right? And I'm really feel terrible. And the pain stuff they put me out, I was like swinging all over the place. So I got the wisdom teeth out, I go home. And my mother, has me in bed, and I'm bleeding a lot, and I'm fine. And then my mother comes in, and she says, "Would you like some ice cream?" Well, yeah, Mom, I think that's a really great idea. And then 5 minutes later, I'm like, could I have another bowl, okay? And then I go to sleep, I wake up the next day, and I'm really fine. But I know I can weasel out a half day of staying at home. And then I go to school. Today, you get your wisdom teeth out. How many OxyContin do they give you?
I know somebody who's gotten 30,
Okay.
a 17-year-old who's gotten
Let me tell you, we don't do this in Ohio. We now have, and if we find out you're prescribing that, we're gonna come and crack down on you. Okay, so that's another thing. Then we have programs in the schools where we're educating people, kids, about the dangers of drugs. So we had a call last week where we invited 5,000 school entities on, and 200 came on the call, with the governor and the attorney general. So I just had a call with my staff, and they tell me, it's better than you think it is. And I said, so what are we gonna do to make sure it's really working? Because the schools are the best single place to fight the drug problem, because the kids are right there, right? And I'm expanding it now to universities, and I also want the clergy, synagogues, churches. I want them at least once a month to talk about the dangers of drugs. Because if we don't go after this in a comprehensive manner, this is a scourge on America. Now, here's the thing that's really interesting. I believe that the single biggest way to heroin is through prescription drugs. And as we crack down on prescription drugs and make them harder to get, guess what people do? They go to heroin. So we have almost an entire generation where this was just treated in a very cavalier way. And it's very, very bad. So if we can work on this, then we can limit the amount of addiction that we have going forward, which is what we're trying to do. But it's a very tough issue, and we have to fight this nationally. This is it's about the soul of our country. So we're doing pretty well with it, but our deaths are up because of heroin and this fentanyl, this new drug. But we're not going to give up. And so my call today to these folks are, okay, what are we going to do to get more entities involved? So we're now going to, this is like a call just happened here, like before I walked in here. with all my drug team. And I got this one lady, she's like hell on wheels. She's so smart and effective. And I said, if they don't get with it, I'm gonna put her on the case. So what they said is, give us a chance. What we're gonna do is we're gonna contact all the schools and say, what are you doing on this issue? If you're doing anti-drug programs, then do yours. But if you're not doing them, then we need to know about it, because we need our schools to be partners with us in terms of saving our children. And today we were at a great thing here, right? Girls, what was your impression of the CADDY program? What'd you think? Smart? Yeah. So we went to a youth anti-drug program this morning, and it was impressive. So we're all in this together. We're all in this together. But as the president, this is, in some sense, I don't want to say this because they'll quote it. I was gonna say it's a national security issue, but you know what? In some ways, it really is. It's about the security of our country and the health of our country. So we've got to engage in it aggressively, and we're not going to win the war overnight, but we got to start winning more battles. Okay? Thank you all very much.